This week on The Big Show, the latest episode of The Big Show, the calendar has turned to August, and this is another huge weekend at the box office. This week, we discussed the absolute zaniness that is James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, the musical Annette, and Lin Manuel-Miranda's family animated film, Vivo. Black Film and TV's Wilson Morales and our co-host Charles Kirkland Jr. will cover that and more on this episode 466 of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to the latest episode of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I am Tim Gordon, and I am joined, of course, every week, as I am, by Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, what's going on, sir?
What's happening? I'm glad to be here.
All right, and Black Film and TV's Wilson Morales. How are you, kind sir?
We are good and warm and ready to go.
All right, man. So speaking of ready to go, man, we got a lot of show going on today. We got all of these huge movies that are opening. We're on our new perch, doing it the way we used to do it. So Wilson, without any further ado, man, what's going on in entertainment, man? It's been a busy week, bro.
Oh, yeah, as you mentioned, the biggest thing that's right now is the Suicide Squad. A lot of people have been waiting to see this. It's obviously not a sequel, but a follow-up to the first one that came out about 5 years ago. You got returning cast members, Viola Davis, along with Margot Robbie and Joel Kinnaman, reprising their roles, along with a whole set of new cast and characters. So that's coming out, directed by James Gunn. You also have playing right now is the Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival, which is currently going on right now. And I know one of the films that they did a preview of pre-festival was a screening of Respect, which is coming out next week, the Aretha Franklin film. And they got a slew of other stuff going on in there. One of the films that's going to play there is Passing, which is Rebecca Hall's film that played at Sundance. As you mentioned, coming out on Netflix, it's already now. I think it's Vivo, Lin Manuel's film. It's an animated musical. Playing also on Netflix is a series called Hit and Run, which stars Leo Raz, he's a star of a hit series called Fouled Up. It also stars Sanaa Lathan in a good supporting role. So that's playing on Netflix right now. You also have playing on BET is a film that played at South by Southwest that has been garnering attention. It's called I'm Fine, Thanks for Asking. I forgot who the female director is, my mistake. But that's going to be playing on BET tomorrow, the 7th. And then also on TV, some shows are ending, some shows are starting. We have now the season finale of Blind Spotting, which stars Jasmine Cephas Jones. Blind Spotting, of course, is the series that's based on the movie that came out that she started. So there's a lot going on TV and films. As we head towards August, you're going to get less big films in a way, I think, and more films as we start talking about festivals and the start of the Oscar campaign.
All righty. Well, thank you for that, Wilson. So without any further ado, before we jump in, Charles, do you have anything before we start chopping these films up this week?
Well, also here in DC, we have our Otakon is happening this weekend. So a lot of us manga and geek nerds of the Japanese anime arts will be headed down to the DC Convention Center to experience, everything that we have there. So it's a big weekend for the DC area as well. So,
for a minute there, you said older con.
Oh, I said Ota, O-T-A, Con, Otakon.
Man, you better chop Wilson down. Wilson is just feeling himself these days.
I thought I was like, is that a synopsis for ARPS.com? No, I'm just
All right, man. Well, I was gonna flip the order, but we gotta lose Wilson early today because Wilson has got junket stuff going on. So since they didn't send me a Suicide Squad shirt, I'm repping the Avengers. So we're going to jump into, hey, I'm putting y'all on blast. If you send me the gear, I'll put it on. But so here we go.
Speaking of Suicide Squad, one quick second.
Oh my God. Okay, so let's talk about Suicide Squad. I was going to open and go on reverse. So watch this. Go ahead, Wilson. What you got? All right. So, I don't know what you do with that. You can't put it on.
Basically,
for the last 7 weeks, so
they have been sending like poker chips like 2 at a time, and they finally set the final one along with a frame to put them in. You know.
All right. Well, congratulations, Wilson. So
I
for
can go
us
downstairs
regular
and get a
people,
couple comic books of the Suicide Squad if you guys want to. I mean, just
no, bro. Come on, we wasting time, man. I'm trying to get into it. Y'all want to show me y'all gear, so I started it. My apologies. So the government sends the most dangerous supervillains in the world, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, King Shark, Harley Quinn, and others to the remote enemy-infused island of Corto Maltese. Armed with high-tech weapons, they trek through the dangerous jungle on a search and destroy mission with only Colonel Rick Flag on the ground to make them behave. The Suicide Squad. Wilson called it, what did you call it? You called it what? When you talked about it a couple minutes ago.
I didn't. I don't know.
What? Okay, I'm going to say it's a reimagining of it. It's not a sequel. It's a reimagining of what.
It's a follow-up.
David,
it's
actually not
when you bring back the same actors in the same characters. You know, it's not a reimagining. It's a follow-up.
Okay. Well, see, my issue with using the term follow-up is a follow-up generally would be the next episode or a sequel. This doesn't feel like a sequel to me. This feels like they're introduced. Well, is it? Am I off base?
Yeah, you're off base because Rick Flag is continuing from where he last left off.
Okay, all right, okay. So I won't call it a reimagining. Okay, I'll be shouted down. It's not a sequel. It's just strange because
why are we not using the word sequel? What's wrong with saying it?
Because it's not a sequel to the first one. It's not a sequel.
Why not?
Okay, because they're saying it's not a sequel. Okay. I'm reading that it's not a sequel. So. Okay. It's kind of odd the way they're doing it, but anyway.
They also said that these were the most dangerous villains on the planet, and that's not true either.
Okay, we get into semantics. I'm trying to set it up so we can discuss it. Y'all, I'm like just trying to figure out what the correct language would be because it's not a sequel. If it was a sequel, this would be Suicide Squad Part 2, but they brought in a new director. They took the same story and they gave it to us again, which is why I called it a reimagining, but I could be wrong. So if it's not, it still stars John Cena, Margot Robbie, Idris Elba, Pete Davidson, Viola Davis, and a bunch of other folks in this thing, Sylvester Stallone. I'll go first on this one, man. I saw this movie and I remember the original that David Ayers did, which I thought was well-intentioned, had star power, it had a good story. I just didn't feel that one was properly executed. It left a lot for me to be desired. I just thought that the tone didn't necessarily work in the Suicide Squad in the first one. So I was not a big fan. I remember, I think I gave it something like, if you go on my numerical system, I gave it like 2.5 stars. I thought Will Smith sort of didn't feel comfortable or look like he was really comfortable. Margot Robbie fits Harley Quinn to a T. So I thought they got that right. Now, in this latest version, they bring in James Gunn, of course, who has worked in the Marvel universe doing Guardians of the Galaxy. And he comes in, and the first thing I look for in these films is the tone, right? If you can get the tone right, that's half the battle. And James Gunn murders the tone. The tone is right on point with what he's doing. And I think all that buddy ensemble work that he does with Guardians of the Galaxy, he was able to bring a lot of that to the story, which I thought made it work well. Charles posted his review this morning that it is amazingly violent. It is. It is excessively violent, but I thought that it was an amazing film. I thought all the cast of characters, the story that Gunn tells, the sort of humor that he gets out of it, the wordplay back and forth between Idris Elba and John Cena, I love that. Even the villain, which I thought was like bizarre and strange, but in a really, really good way. Suicide Squad, or let me rephrase that. The first one was called The Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad, which is the new one, I thought this is one of my favorite films of the summer. I couldn't wait to talk about this movie. So with that, I will start with Wilson Morales. Wilson, what did you think about The Suicide Squad?
Well, as we discussed last week, sometimes when you see a film, and because of the position we're in, we have to know what kind of director is, James Gunn. Knowing that, it makes a big difference. When you're going to see The Suicide Squad, knowing what James Gunn has done with Guardians of the Galaxy and his background before that in working in the Trauma era, you know, you're going to get a little bit of zaniness. You're going to get, and this one, I guess DC was like, do your thing, go all out. It's an R-rated. He was like, really? Okay. Let me make it as bloody as possible. You know, Suicide Squad means somebody's going to die. Y'all don't know which one. You know, it's like 10 little Indians who's left standing. Now I'm just going to play around with it and then add what my creativity is. Knowing that, you can have fun. I think, as you mentioned with David Ayers, you know, they kind of shackled him because he's more intense, and that was a PG-13 movie. So it's always like, you know, you couldn't let him be him. You know, you let him do an R-rated movie, he will go all out. You know, because that's what David Ayers is about. You know, it's like, you know, you shackled him when you give him like that sort of PG-13 rating, knowing what he's done with Training Day, knowing what he's done with Street Kings, knowing what he's done with Bright. You're saying, right. And the films he's done right there. It's like, no, you know, here, the guys, everybody here is having fun. You know, Margot Robbie, as you mentioned, you know, she's having a blast. You know, it's like, oh, she gets to have fun in these characters than some of the other roles she plays. You know, she was like, she don't need to step in a box and say, oh, this is what Harley Quinn is about. So no, this is what I'm going to make Harley Quinn about. You know, Idris Elba, you know, it's a new role for him. You know, he likes having going back between Marvel and DC because he's played Heimdall in, you know, the Thor movies. You know, he's also done The Losers, which is part of the Vertigo comics. You know, so he's having fun in there. And just the tone, you know, it's like, you got Stallone in there. You forget what role he's playing. I won't spoil it. But there's a lot of people in this movie that, like, you know, don't be surprised. Remember, it's blink and you miss them. Some of them are going to go faster than you know it. But you're going to have a blast.
Literally.
You know, you're like, oh, just think of, what was that movie that Steven Seagal did with Halle Berry? Executive Decision. Remember how he was top billed? And you're like, what? You know, and it was up to Kurt Russell, like, wow, they bamboozled me. You say, like, Kurt Russell, you know, he the lead.
Hey, man, but Wilson, you absolutely on point. You better pay attention because everybody will make it to the end. That's all I can tell you.
If you decide to pick up, like, if you bend down to pick up your water bottle, you're like, what, he gone already? You say, like, you know, you try to go like this with your popcorn. Oh, he's gone already.
Oh man. So Charles, what did you think about the Suicide Squad?
Oh wow. Okay. First of all, I watched Collateral today with Michael Mann's movie, right? And when I'm watching this with my son for the first time, and I said, look, you can tell that this is a Michael Mann film. You can see all. The director makes a difference. Big time. He got James Gunn in here to do this movie. I mean, he's a pro at creating humor out of dark situations. And in this movie, it's definitely dark. It's definitely humorous. It's definitely violent. And I think he encompasses the tone of the comic book perfectly. And that's the thing about DC movies. DC movies versus Marvel movies, DC always, even their books, their tone is always darker and different than Marvel's. And so when they've been doing these movies for a long time, trying to capture the dark tone that DC has, and it hasn't been successful. But the Suicide Squad comic book has always been kind of lighthearted and irreverent and just silly at times, because the whole premise is you're getting all these super villains together to be heroes. And so it's just irreverent and crazy and zany. And this is right in Gunn's wheelhouse. So when they got him for this movie, it was perfect. And I think he's done one of the better DCEU movies that's ever been done with this film. I gave it a B-. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie of the summer. There's some other things that are coming out. And we may even talk about a better movie in this show. But I thought it was a very, very good effort and like you said, blink, people are gone. I like the way he jumps right into the story and then gives you the background later. kind of like he did with Guardians. All of a sudden, you're seeing Peter Quill just going for this orb, and you don't know who he is, what's going on, and all the story develops later. So it's the same. He marvelized the DCEU movie, and it works well.
And that's a great point that I want to say, because the first reaction I had walking out the theater is I said it took a guy who had been making films for Marvel to come over to DC, and he made, outside of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, that's the best movie to me that they've had in the DCEU. This film here, The Suicide Squad, it is the closest film, as you said, to the comic. They captured the tone. It reminded me a lot of when I watched Deadpool. The first time I saw Deadpool, before you got to the opening credits, you were like, okay, this is gonna work because the tone of this is this character, is this comic book character. And you're right about director. James Gunn makes all the difference. No disrespect to Zack Snyder, who, missed the 50-50 hit and miss. You put James Gunn in here, I wouldn't be surprised, and I know that Marvel would never let this happen, but can you imagine if the Russos came over to DC and made a DC film, what you would get in a DC story if you let them just roam free on a R and just go for it like he did with Gunn? So again, that part can't be understated about his influence, his work that he's done on the other side across the street, and how he's brought that effort across to this side, and DC is the beneficiaries of it.
I think it depends upon the story too. I don't think I don't think James Gunn could do Batman. I don't think he could do Superman, because that's not in his wheelhouse. But this is in his wheelhouse. Right. And if you bring the Russos over, it depends on what story. But
I think the Russos could do a Batman or a Superman. I honestly do believe they could. I do believe they could. But so that's what we have for that. Wilson is amazingly silent. He's like, I said what I had to say about this movie.
Yeah, what I had to say. I'm going to have to let you go. But before I let you go, I do want to say, I don't know if you'll talk about it, but I did like Free Guy. It's a fun film. I think
it doesn't come out this week, man. That's next week. Stop getting ahead of us, man, by a week. Stop.
Yeah, this is what happens when you're trying to speed things along.
So you about to bounce and go hit your other piece, because we're about to talk about Annette real quick. Yeah.
I gotta go.
All right.
But it's good talking to y'all. I will see y'all next week. But duty calls. That's what happens when you got to work during a Friday. It's like you never know.
Thank you, Wilson.
I will see you when I see y'all.
Yeah, you will see us next week. That's when we'll see you. Take care, bro. Enjoy your weekend. All right, so that was Wilson Morales, BlackfilmandTV.com, who joins us. He's going to do an abbreviated piece, as you can tell, because there's other interviews. Wilson is the prince of the city, man. So he's out there making it happen, man. So our next film, Charles, which I know you didn't get an opportunity to see, but I did, so we'll talk about it, is Annette. And Annette, of course, is a film directed by Leos Carax, and it tells a story. And before I get to it tells a story, it stars Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Am I correct?
Cotillard, yeah.
Cotillard, thank you. And it tells the story of Henry, who's a stand-up comedian with a fierce sense of humor, who falls in love with Anne, a world-renowned opera singer. Under the spotlight, they form a passionate and glamorous power couple. With the birth of their first child, a mysterious little girl with an exceptional destiny, their lives are turned upside down. Man, let me just tell you, Adam Driver is a guy who, for me, has been picking up momentum over the last several years, right? Of course, he was in Marriage Story. I remember he did a film. I want to think it was called Patterson. That was probably like a 2016, 2015 film that I saw. And I was like, okay, Adam Driver has a very distinctive style in his acting, right? It's kind of intense, but we've also seen him, as a part of the Lucasfilm piece when he played in the Star Wars series. Star Wars trilogy, or the Star Wars franchise, I say, not trilogies. So Adam Driver's been around for a minute, right? So in this latest film here, he plays, I would say, for people who are a lot older, a Lenny Bruce sort of a character, an Andrew Dice Clay sort of a comedian who is really, really toxic, or, and he's out there with this really interesting sense of humor. He falls in love with this wonderful opera singer, played by Cotillard. And of course, as you heard me say in the opening, the two of them get together and they have this romance. They're dominating social media because, it's kind of a Beauty and the Beast sort of a situation between the two of them. And he's a very, as you can tell from his humor or the type of job he has, he's a very intense type as he's portrayed in this film, where Cotillard as the opera singer is sensitive and cultured. And so the setup of it makes a lot of sense going in. So it opens with this amazing musical number, Charles, that you don't see coming, under the guise of let's start the movie. And they sing this, let's start the piece, and they take it out to the street. So it's very vibrant. When you watch the first 10 minutes, you go, okay, well, let's see where this story's going. This looks like it's starting off pretty good. Let's just say, Charles, by the time you get to the third act, you're spending a lot of time doing this. This movie, and when it was done, I came downstairs and I went to my significant other and I said, that was interesting. That didn't do what I thought it was going to do. So let's just say, I don't want to leak it and give it out to people, but the film starts off with one tone that's very upbeat. And you have this relationship between this really brutish stand-up comedian and this really sensitive opera singer. And let's just say, without spoiling it, that the story gets very dark. And, you're in a cave by the time this film ends. There's betrayal, there is jealousy, there is, Charles and I saw a movie last night that I can't say the name of, but there was a character in there that had a daughter, and he sort of used the daughter's ability in a way that was not beneficial to the daughter. And the same sort of thing happens in Annette. So I will just say, for people going in to watch this movie, and again, as you can tell, I'm tap dancing around discussing it, because I really want you to get the brunt of the story. So let's just say that what you watch in the first 10 minutes, by the time you get to the end, just think 180 degrees from the first 10 minutes of the film, and I think you'll be in really good shape. But my issue with it is that I think that in telling this story, I think that there's a shock value to it that you clearly don't see coming. And I think the execution of that could have been, I hate to use the phrase hella, because, people always see like, what does hella mean? It needed to be vastly smoother in its execution than what Leo Carax, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly because his name is kind of an anagram. Leo Carax, man, God bless you. You told a good story, but it's all about executing the story. And the execution is the absolute key, Charles, that, what's on paper is one thing, but we've got to shoot it. You got to take it to the editing bay. And then when you piece that story together, that story's got to be flawless. It's got to rise. If it's not supposed to rise, it's supposed to make us feel some sort of way. The story does make me feel some sort of way, but it's very clunky in how it gets there. And the second act of this film, to me, really is the film's undoing. I didn't give Suicide Squad a grade, but if I did, I would have given that an A-. This film, I'd give a C- to, because like I said, I was prepared for, the way this film starts. I was prepared for something totally different from what I got. And analyzing it, Charles, from when I saw it a couple of weeks ago, from start to finish, it's the middle that's the problem with this movie, man. The ending is not an issue, but it's how you got me to the end that I just felt like we were manipulated. I felt like it wasn't executed properly, and it's very clunky writing in the middle. So that's my take on Annette, man. I mean, it's hard to talk about it because there's spoilers involved, and you don't want to spoil it for audiences. But I wish this is a film you would have saw, because I would have loved to have gotten your feedback on what you think about the performances between Driver and Cotillard.
Well, two comments come to mind real quickly as I just hear what you say. First of all, what is it with Adam Driver and singing? I mean, he did that in Marriage Story, and it seemed like it came out of nowhere. Is this something that he wants to get into? I don't know. But I've said it many times before. The second thing, execution is crucial with a film. You know, you can take the simplest story and the most predictable story, but if you execute it well, you've got an entertaining property on your hands. So, and that goes a lot of times, again, back to the director and their vision, how they going to execute that story. So, director makes a difference. This is I don't know this guy Leos Carax, if this is his first film or whether he's done other things before, but
He has.
Hey, director makes a difference, and maybe it's something he's got to work on.
Oh, and I forgot one crucial detail, man, that this movie didn't start off, or it wasn't initially conceived to be a movie. It was actually conceived to be an album, to be a Sparks album. And they took the album and turned it into a movie. So I think that also explains why it probably doesn't flow as well as I think it is. So I'm not making this up. I mean, I've been watching movies professionally for 3 decades and as a fan longer than that. So we all know, Charles, when a movie works and when a movie doesn't work. And then generally, if it doesn't work, we can explain to you why it doesn't work. Same thing when it does work, like we just talked earlier about Suicide Squad. So Annette is in local theaters. Of course, getting back to Suicide Squad, that's playing in theaters as well as on HBO Max. So you can check both those out. Which brings us to our final film that I want to talk about today. And that is the film from Netflix, the animated Lin Manuel-Miranda film, Vivo. And it's a story of a music-loving Kikachu who embarks on a journey of a lifetime to fulfill his destiny and deliver a love song for an old friend. Now, this film is directed by Kirk DeMicchio. And I'm trying to look really quickly to what DeMicchio has done, because
he did The Croods.
He did The Croods. All right, so he did The Croods.
Space Chimps before that as a director, but he's
now which one?
A lot of things.
Which one other than The Croods?
Space Chimps before that.
Okay.
But he's written a lot of things, but those were the 2 movies that he's directed.
All right, so this film, of course, stars Lin Manuel-Miranda, Zoe Saldana is in it, Gloria Estefan, Brian Tyree Henry, which I thought was a very interesting choice in the film as well. And Charles, you wrote the review on this one, man. I'm going to let you lead off with Vivo, because we talk every year and we know Pixar is a major player. Disney, when they make their films, their players. Warner Brothers is kind of hit and miss with their stories. But here's Netflix creating some original work, and they didn't do it by themselves. They did it in partnership with Sony. How does Vivo work for you?
Well, Vivo actually started out as a DreamWorks project, and it got paid off to Sony Pictures Animation Studios. And for me, this is a vibrant, gorgeous piece of work. Of course, you're talking about Lin Manuel-Miranda, and his music is impeccable. And this, it's from the moment the screen lights up, you hear the bongo beats and the music gets going, and you know that this is going to be just a rocking time. You're just having a great time with all the music in the film. It's got a great story, very family oriented themes of love and legacy and loss, and it's just beautiful. And the journey of a kinkajou. I mean, how many people knew what a kinkajou was before seeing this movie? It's just, I mean, the animation is gorgeous. You got D'Amico, who directed the actual sequences, and then he has a co-director, Brandon Jeffords, who does the dream sequences that occur in the film. But it all just works together so seamlessly with the music and the visuals, and it's bright and colorful. And you got uh, Cuba where it starts and Miami where it ends and everything. I mean, lights and colors and Latinx representation is positive and glorious in this film, showing all the colors of the rainbow. I really enjoyed this film. I sat down and I watched it the first time, and I've seen it 3 times now. It's just amazing. Zoe Saldana as the mother. This new girl, Simo is her last name. I cannot pronounce the first name. As the young girl Gabby, who is the niece of the uncle that starts the film and is the friends with Vivo, who's the Kinkajou. But it's a glorious film. I enjoyed it very much, and to me, this was the best movie of the week. You gave The Suicide Squad an A-. I gave this movie an A. I loved everything about it.
Well, I'm not going to argue, which I never do, about movies because what we think about movies, it's all personal choice. I think along the lines when I see animated films that the really good ones, I'm like, oh yeah, we'll see that again when it comes award season. And Vivo is definitely one we will see again. It's surprising to me because generally as a rule, we know going in that what we're going to get from Pixar, what we're going to get from Disney a lot of times. And as I said in my opening, that sometimes some of the other studios, whether it's Universal or Warner Brothers, they're kind of hit and miss. But, this is really a surprise that, Netflix was the beneficiary of this, because I think this is another one of the pandemic films that studios were selling off product and Netflix ended up with Vivo, and a smart decision from Netflix to get this film. This film will play well on that platform. To echo everything you said, I love the animation is glorious in here. Lin Manuel-Miranda just has a certain rhythm and a beat that he writes and performs his films to. And, you see In the Heights, you see Hamilton, you see all the stuff that he's done. He's got this rhythm that he can capture, and it works tremendously in this film. All of these scenes with the Kikachu and the young girl as that's supporting the Kikachu, who's trying to follow his dream to get this song. It's an amazing film. It really is. I saw this late. I saw The Suicide Squad early, and it in two totally different films, 180 degrees on the spectrum. And this is a really good representation because the 3 films that we have on today's show are all 3 in different areas, right? 3 polar, kind of opposite experiences from one another. So the Suicide Squad, the tone of it, perfect, works tremendously well, a lot of fun to watch, right?
And hard R. It's a hard R movie.
Hard R. You go to Annette, which is a film that's it starts off kind of bubbly and then it gets really, really dark. Not executed as well as Suicide Squad, and the tone of it doesn't necessarily work. Then you come to Vivo, where the tone works, the animation is great, it's great family fun, and it's the sort of movie that you can watch over and over and over again. So I would agree with you. I would go B+ because I just want to be, I just want to just have some level of fighting with you. Because if I went with an A, we would both be A, so we don't have to see it the same way. But we
need Wilson back. I need Wilson back. He agrees with me most of the time.
It doesn't matter, man. But I'm just saying that I think Vivo is absolutely fantastic, and the 2 genres that secretly that I love the most are animated and musicals, right? So if you have music in an animated film, already this year. What was the earlier film that we got into this huge debate about a couple of months ago about they were passing? Luca. So this film to me is superior to Luca. Luca is a good film,
Yeah.
But this is the sort of film that sort of really works. It kind of clicks. And like I said, I think the secret sauce is Lin Manuel-Miranda, who just, I don't know what it is, that it's something innate in him that when he's writing and performing and he gets his cast to perform or he talks to directors, they work it out. There's a certain, and I'm giving it to Miranda on this one because he's consistent. If you watch Hamilton, In the Heights in this film, that they all have this rhythm about them that is very natural. And I pray and hope, Charles, that Steven Spielberg has that same rhythm in West Side Story later on, because if he doesn't, it's not going to work. I'm telling you, that rhythm and that beat, that snappiness to the musical numbers. I mean, there's songs that are in Vivo that I don't think are really good songs, but just because of the come on, man, the song with what were they, flamingos or?
Yeah, the love song.
You thought that was a good song?
It served its purpose.
Okay. A quick aside, because again, I'm just saying stuff that I repeat on this podcast, and I've been doing it since 2009. So I've been saying some of the, if you've listened to me long enough, you've heard me say certain things, right? If you're doing a musical, a successful musical, Charles, what do I always say you need in a successful musical?
I don't remember.
A songbook. You got to have really good songs, right? So if you think about Rent, if you think about Les Miserables, if you think about Chicago, if you think about Dreamgirls, those have wonderful songs that are memorable. My only complaint, which is why I went to a B+ versus your A, is that I agree with everything you said, Charles. I think it looks gorgeous. I think you can watch it over and over. I think that the screen, I mean the songbook, the songs aren't great to me. I mean, they're good. They're not great. Like, there are no songs I'm going to be walking away from going, what's that? Oh, yeah, you didn't see that? That was in, no. But if I say, and I'm telling you, I'm not going, you know what I'm talking about. If I say, what was the great song from Chicago with Richard Gere and Renee Zellweger about the gun? Oh. He reached for the gun. The gun, the gun, the gun, the gun. That song still sticks in my head. And I saw Chicago. That's almost 20 years old, man. So I'm telling you, a songbook is like a screenplay, right? When we talk about really good movies, you think about really good screenplays. Name me one really good movie, Charles, that has a bad screenplay.
Wait. How many songs can you pull out from Hamilton?
Oh man, please, the original song. How can a bastard, orphan, son of, really? You asking the wrong person. I love Hamilton. There are about 5 songs I can pick out from Hamilton. In the Room Where It Happens. Come on, really? Really?
Well, how many times have you seen Hamilton?
5 times.
And how many times have you seen Vivo?
1 time.
Okay, so as you see it, you get.
I've seen Chicago, maybe. Well, that's not true.
As you watch it again, the music gets ingrained in you. So I'm saying, when you get through it the second time, there's no way you can get away from bounce to the beat of my own drum. There's no way you can get away from even the love song. There's no way you can get away from them. Those things get stuck in your heads too. And some of the stuff, I mean, Lin Manuel said that this has been a delight for him because he got to work with 2 icons in music that before he's worked with all these lesser known talents, but this time he got to work with Juan DeMarcos Gonzalez from the Buena Vista Music Social Club and Gloria Estefan. Those are icons in the Latin music world that, I mean, so this has been a dream project for him to get this done and have this kind of cachet behind him so he could create these things. And I'm saying, sure, you may not say right now but after seeing it 3 times, I've got 2 songs stuck in my head already. And that's because I've watched it 3 titimes. So as you watch it again, I think you will get a couple songs that will speak to you.
Okay, and that's a legitimate point, right? Because I was going to say with Chicago. Chicago was another one of those stories, but I've seen Chicago on the stage. I've seen it on the big screen. So Chicago is just one of those musicals that really, really work for me. I think it's got a great songbook. You know, Dreamgirls, I never saw the play on Broadway, but I do remember, and I don't know if you were at the screening, I remember going to the screening for that. And when Jennifer Hudson, because I told everybody before I went in, and I said, if this song works, this movie's gonna work.
Right.
And when she delivered that song, it's the only time I've ever been to a screening where critics stood up and applauded. It was like, oh yeah, bro, she's gonna win the Oscar for that. That was an amazing performance. So you're right. But my point, I say all that to say, bringing it back, that when you talk about musicals and you talk about animated films, the animation is always key in these films. And I think Pixar, for the most part, will just nail the animation, right? And as a rule, you and I have talked about this. I think I love every movie from Pixar except for one franchise they made, which I'm not a fan. I mean, they okay. I'm just not the biggest fan of the Cars franchise in Pixar, but everything else, from Toy Story to WALL-E to Up to like anything else they've done, you got me on Pixar, man, especially with Soul. Soul, I was a little confused about because I went in with one expectation. And then when I watched it again for what it was, I was like, oh yeah, Soul works. Now, I also will say, when we're talking about musicals, since we're talking about two today on the show with Annette and Vivo, let us not forget, we're coming up on the anniversary of one of the biggest surprises last year for me that was a musical that I went in going, man, this guy, I mean, he's a friend of mine. He's somebody I know, but I'm just not really expecting a lot from this musical, this Christmas musical he does. And man, what is the name of this film, Charles? It escapes me.
Jingle Jangle, A Christmas Journey.
My God, what a revelation that was as a musical. Now, you're talking about a good songbook, great songs in there. It wasn't animated, but sort of this kind of comic book, Christmas carol tale, really well done. So when you talk about musicals, I'm a guy that's kind of interesting in that way because, you know, people talk about loving musicals. I love musicals, man. I think musicals are what I grew up on, watching Carousel as a kid and, you know, Oklahoma and a lot of these stories, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. You know, you grow up watching this kind of stuff. And then when you get to a certain age and you're watching musicals, there's a certain expectation. But after thinking through it, Charles, all these years, I get back to the songbook analogy for musicals, much in the same way we talk about scripts and screenplays for films. So it just is what it is, man. So that's interesting. So those are our three. Go ahead, Charles.
You did touch on something that is a problem for me with the film. And
Okay.
that is the fact that it's on Netflix and not released in theaters, just on Netflix. And so like Jingle Jangle, how many people are going to get to see it? How many people are going to experience it? I'm concerned because this is a masterwork that may go unnoticed. I don't know how many people are talking about Vivo outside of us, but this is something that's incredible and it needs to be seen. It's not In the Heights. I mean, it's the quality of In the Heights, but In the Heights had theatrical release and HBO Max. So I'm concerned about how the exposure for this film will be. And you talked about Oscar consideration. Who knows?
Well, I think the thing, because we talk about this a lot, and I've had a chance in time, especially over the last year or so, of us being where we are right now. The thing about Netflix you got to remember is Netflix has 200 million subscribers, and that's just not necessarily just the 200 million that are here, but that's subscribers that are overseas and around the world globally. Now, the thing that's interesting to me about Netflix, and it's a gift and a curse, is along the lines of what you're saying right now, Charles, is that on Netflix, of course, they have this top 10 every week. Yeah. You know how you go there and they'll be like, oh, your movie's trending, it's #1. The problem with Netflix, though, to me, is that I think they do, if I had to give it a letter grade, I think they do about a B effort in content, right? So they've got tons of content, but I'm saying if you average their content out, because they have content for almost every genre, for everybody. So they're international films, they have reality shows, There's dramas, there's musicals, there's everything that's on Netflix, all these different genres. But I think the problem is that, well, it's two things that bother me about it, right? Is one, a movie can trend and it might be hot maybe 2 weeks max. I've never seen a movie be hot, like even Bridgerton or The Queen's Gambit might have trended in the top 10 for multiple weeks, but you won't trend at number one because Netflix is dropping new product every week. And every week there's something new. And it's not even just every week. It's like during the week, they're dropping stuff on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Tuesdays. So there's always new content. But that gets me to the curse aspect of it, because my issue with Netflix is like, I'll watch a lot of stuff and then you know how you go and they have the algorithm. So a lot of the same stuff stays there and I'm always searching for new stuff. And I've got to try to weed through all the old stuff that I've already seen. Right. So you got that issue of trying to find the content if it's not posted on your page. And then secondly, that it's hot for like a minute, but then there's so much other stuff coming that new stuff doesn't get a chance to have a space of its own to breathe for several weeks without you bombarding the streaming channel with more stuff. So I get it from a standpoint that you know, Netflix announced a couple of years ago, Charles, if you famously remember, that they were putting $8 billion into content, and you were like, man, $8 billion? So that's all sorts of films, man. The F-Boy Island, you know, which I haven't watched yet. I saw that pop up. I was like, F-Boy Island. What was this? Remote to Love. I mean, all these different things. Like when Wilson was talking about one earlier, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to go look for that because that didn't pop up on my queue. Exactly. So if it doesn't pop up on your queue, how do you know on Netflix where some stuff is? And then even if it does pop up on your queue and you watch it once, you're bombarded with so much content that it's hard to go back and revisit stuff that you really want to watch. So Netflix, I think, where we are as a culture right now, kind of is the perfect analogy of what the film business has become, Charles. It's like, okay, and it's not just a pure Netflix issue. I got HBO Max, right? So HBO Max has the Suicide Squad. You go on HBO Max, HBO has new content that comes, and it's not just once a week. I wanted to ask you, did you get the email that there's a new Disney Plus series that's dropping, that we have preview episodes of that drops on Wednesday? So I've got to watch that over the weekend. We live in a world right now, and I can say this honestly because and you've been a critic for how long now, Charles?
A dozen years.
Okay, so you've been a dozen years. I'm twice that amount, right? So we honestly live in a world that pandemic, you know, post-pandemic is, what's the best way to say this in a very nice way? It is kind of like a wild, wild west for distribution right now.
Yeah.
Now, pre-pandemic, what I loved so much was that you and I would sit at home, and at the end of the week, Friday, we would get an email and would basically go, okay, these are the releases for the next several weeks. There was another company in DC as well that had the same thing. So you had your movies sort of organized. We weren't worrying about covering stuff that was on streaming services because a lot of those didn't exist. And you would get your letters. You could kind of plan your movies out that you needed to see stuff. You could plan your coverage, and you were good to go. The pandemic comes and everything changes. All those public relation agencies went on hiatus, right? So you still had to figure out how to see these movies and all these. So now the streaming services are coming into play because everybody's home. So now you're not just covering what's coming out of major studios and indies, but now there's the rise of Netflix, and there's Amazon, and there's Hulu, and there's this service and that service. So you're getting all these different things to watch that are streaming services on top of movies. Hence, fast forward to August of 2021, and now you live in a world where we're trying to manage stuff back in the theaters, stuff on streaming channels. And remember, you're one person who has to do a job trying to manage and trying to weed through all the stuff that's out there, whether it's films that are coming that we're going to talk about next week on Apple Plus. We're talking about movies on Disney or projects on Disney Plus next week. We're going to be talking about studio releases. It's a lot, man. It is just a whole lot. And I think, Charles, to your point, we talk about it primarily with Netflix. But even in situations where you look at a film like The Suicide Squad or Annette, which is a smaller film that's going to have a theatrical run, I don't know how the public, A, has the bandwidth and time to try to catch a lot of this stuff, because, you know, if you're home, you're trying to watch this, there's only so many hours a day you can devote to watching television. If you're going out to a theater, there's only so many times you can go to a theater because of the cost. And even at home, you're having to pay for the Disney Pluses and the Netflix and the HBO Maxes.
Yep.
So it speaks to a much larger problem of so many smaller films that back in the day when we had art houses that would play a lot of these smaller films, they've gone away because of the pandemic. They've been replaced by all these streaming services that people can't watch nor afford. Charles, I mean, talk to me. Am I over dramatizing this situation, or am I living in a neighborhood that you're familiar with?
I don't think you're over exaggerating it at all. You know, in being in this industry, you know, there's certain standards that you have to attain as far as the number of articles you have to write to remain in certain groups. I've reached that limit in a month, because there's just so much stuff coming out. You know, it's impossible for an average person to even think about trying to see anything significant, because there's just so much. And the pandemic has made it worse, with stuff getting pushed back from years before, and they're all getting dumped at the same time. I don't know how a normal person can find something that they enjoy, or find a selection of things to enjoy, because there's just so much. And that's the real reason why I'm concerned about Vivo. We just had Scarlett Johansson suing Disney Plus because they released the thing on their platform. This thing is going straight to Netflix with no theatrical release. Who's going to have the time to search through the Netflix servers? I got it sent to me, but who's going to find it? How are they going to find it? And it's just a ridiculous problem that's happening right now. There's just so much. It's daunting. Is the word that I would say.
No, I got you. And we got about 10 minutes to go. So I think the other thing, we talked a little last week, because, Wilson hates when we talk about the business of the industry. He's bored of that. He just wants to talk about movies. But I'm fascinated about the business aspect. And when I talk about the business aspect, we know that Scarlett Johansson, not to go back and bring all that stuff up from last week, but of course, Black Widow opens huge, which a typical Marvel movie does. And then generally the pattern with Marvel movies is when, they're released globally, that they kind of build, and you get, this movie's made $600 million globally, and it's made $500 million here. So it's $1 billion, whatever, right? And with this deal with Disney Plus, with all the theaters not being, or people being at home, and Disney Plus going, okay, we'll just charge you $29.99 and you can watch it at home. Of course, the second week of Black Widow, which I'm assuming will be the second week of Shang-Chi, if they do the same strategy, it's going to drop off the cliff, because why go to the theater after the opening weekend when I can just watch it at home, right? So I think that this is going to be a problem for a lot of their bigger talent moving forward. I can see Tom Holland, who probably has got some kind of a deal that's tied to the back end to grosses. Benedict Cumberbatch is probably in the same place. So this is a very real issue that the business is dealing with. But I say all that to say about Netflix, going back there, is that the thing with Netflix is Netflix, as a rule, doesn't put a lot of their movies in theaters. Like they will release some in theaters for small limited runs during award season. Just say, hey, it was in there for a week. Ma Rainey is in there for a week. Leave us alone. Or this movie was in there. Leave us alone. Roma was that film a couple of years ago, right? It played in the theaters, right?
Right.
But I think the thing about Netflix, which has always been a mystery, is that nobody's able to understand the metrics of Netflix, like how many people are watching a particular movie, right? So you'll tell me or show me on your service that the movie is trending in the top 10 or it's the number one trending movie. What does that mean? I mean, Netflix has never released any data to tell any service like the result of having, I don't know how many billions of dollars of content that they have on there at any given time, because nobody's queue is the same, right? So if I go to your house and I look at the stuff you're watching, I'm like, have you ever done that, Charles, where you've gone to somebody's house and go, hey, that's not all mine. Where'd you get that from? And I remember, so there are times when I get bored, Charles, and I'll go, I want to expand my queue on Netflix. So I'll start picking stuff that generally I wouldn't watch, which will open the door for other movies. It's a very interesting place that we're in right now, that you have services like Netflix where no two people on the planet are looking at the same thing when they turn on their television. It's not like ABC, CBS, and Fox back in the day where you know at 9 o'clock, everybody can see this. At 10 o'clock, everybody sees that. On Netflix, nobody sees the same thing unless we all hunt and look for the same thing. But it's a very interesting piece, and I'll just leave it at that, man. So when you talk about that, man, that's what I think about and go there immediately.
It's hilarious because just as you mentioned that, I've been to my sister-in-law's house and I pull up her Netflix and I see stuff. I'm like, I'm not watching that. What? I don't even know what that is. But what's even funnier is in my own house, I have 3 children. If I go onto their accounts on Netflix, each one of them is even different from what I'm watching. Their top 10 is even different from my top 10. So I'm like, well, how do they do this?
I have no idea.
It's crazy. It's really interesting, I should say. I wouldn't say crazy because in this time we talk about mental health, we shouldn't. It's ridiculously interesting how they comprise this algorithm that's personal to each person, and that way people don't get to see what truly is. I mean, back in the day, we had Nielsen ratings, which would tell us what the number one TV show is, and you could say, "Oh, everybody's watching this." But with Netflix, you have no idea who's watching what and what's really truly popular. It's just interesting.
Well, to your point, and before I close out, I was going to say my significant loves watching foreign language movies, usually Nollywood films. She loves the Bollywood films, and she loves watching these reality shows. So when I turn on her queue, I'm like, I don't recognize any of this stuff. Like, I'm like, what are you watching? Like, so then you go and look at the stuff I'm watching, and it boggles my mind that there are no two Netflix queues that are the same. And even on on all these other services, there's just way too much content to consume. And I think even on our site, the FilmGordon.com, we could use another writer or two. And if we had another writer or two, that person would be on the show with us going, man, it's just too much stuff. I can't keep up with all this stuff. Because I guesstimate, and I used to say this pre-pandemic, that unbeknownst to us, we would talk about we see 300 movies a year. I think there were a couple of years that I tracked, or several years that I tracked, that I was averaging somewhere in the vicinity of like 270 movies a year I was watching, right? And I think now if you started tracking and you added everything that we were streaming along with movies, that number would go up higher than that. And still, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I'm missing.
Yep.
Just can't see it all. You're just one person. And then even for our website, the audience can't consume it all. So, we giving out, as a rule, we might review between 2 to 3 movies a week. Is that about right, Charles?
About right, yeah.
2 to 3 movies a week. And for people, a lot of that's still too much. It's like, man, 3 movies a week? You guys are putting out 12 reviews a month, and that's nothing. 12 reviews is nothing compared to what's out there. So I say all that to say, man, that I'm about to bring this episode to a close. We're in August now. We're back on Fridays. Thank God. So if you're listening to us on DC Radio, which is our home, you know, don't get confused because we were always doing it on Friday. We literally went to Saturday for the home edition. But as Charles would famously say, oh, it took you all summer to figure that out? Yeah, pretty much, man. Pretty much. So we have a lot going on, man. We really do. But it is the joy of my life every week to be on this podcast and to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. I know next week's show, we got biopic coming. We've got the first 3 episodes of the latest Disney Plus series. And you also probably have the film that opened the Sundance Film Festival, which is going to be, have you seen it yet, Charles? The film that opened Sundance that's going to be on Apple Plus that we have to review next week?
Oh, yeah, yes.
Oh, yeah. So we got movies. We didn't talk about them.
Free Guy is next week, too.
Which one?
Free Guy.
Oh, dang. Oh, yeah. You don't want to miss next week's show. This week's show was good. Next week's show. Woo! Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But as we tell you guys in closing every week, please see something good at the movies. We have talked about several candidates. I would just say, for the record, if you happen to miss Annette, and I'm sure they listening, it's okay. It's okay. Save your bandwidth for the better stuff. Go on without me. So Adam Driver, Marianne Cotillard, don't get mad at me. Go on without me on Annette. But so we will see you guys on the other side. Charles, thank you. And on behalf of Wilson Morales, man, it's always a pleasure. Episode 466 is in the can. We'll see you guys next week, man. You guys take care and enjoy your weekend. Peace.